Well, thanks to those of you who could join us today. My name is Amy Watson. I'm an economist with the Montana Department of Labor and Industry, and today I'm going to talk just a little bit about the state's workforce needs and how you can use labor market information to help students identify successful careers in the state. I'm going to talk a little bit about just the general landscape, the economic landscape and labor market in Montana. Talk about labor market outcomes specifically for college graduates, and then look at the university system and how it's doing as a workforce development arm of the state. And then I'll end with just a little bit of information, of course, about what's been happening this year in 2020, particularly with the global pandemic and how that may have impacted our workforce. So Montana ended 2019 in pretty strong economic condition. As you can see on this chart here, sorry, I'm moving my little screen around. As you can see, we've had pretty strong payroll employment growth, personal income growth, and growth in our GDP over the last 10 years, really, with a few minor dips. The 2013 dip in personal income was because of the federal government shutdown, and then we saw some dip in the GDP in 2016 with the Bakken oil prices falling. So other than that, we've seen pretty consistent growth in the state, and that's translated to pretty strong wage growth for Montanans. So right now in 2019, the most recent year that we have, our average wage in the state was just under $45,000, and over the last 5 years, the real wage growth has been about 1.2%. So that means that the economic growth that we've been seeing in the state has translated to increases in income, more money in the pockets of Montanans, which is good when we talk about whether or not that growth actually made its way to individuals across the state. Over the last 10 years, since 2009, basically since the Great Recession, Montana ranked 7th fastest among states for wage growth, with an average of 2.9% growth. So again, that signals that our economic growth has impacted our just general population as well, and we've seen growth there, which is great. When we look at workforce outcomes of graduates, that obviously varies by program. What you're looking at here is Montana college graduates from our university system, and their workforce outcomes as reported on their tax return, so their income. Their median real income is on the y-axis, and the percent of graduates who filed income taxes in the state, either as a resident or non-resident, is on the x-axis there. So the size of the bubble on this chart corresponds to the number of graduates in each program. So the larger the bubble, the more graduates in the program, and then those programs in the upper right-hand corner have better workforce outcomes than those in the lower left-hand corner. The largest program among graduates is the liberal arts programs, followed by business, and then health professions, and then education. That rounds out the top four in the state. You'll notice of those four, health professions has the best workforce outcomes, with over 75% of graduates remaining in Montana after graduation, and they make over $30,000 a year in that first year. A lot of those graduates are nursing students. That's the largest program within the health professions degree. Within business, it's the general business degree, and then within liberal arts, it's a program called just general studies, and that's actually the most common program among graduates in the state. And you can see that the workforce outcomes for those graduates are below average, with less than 70% remaining in Montana, employed in Montana, and earning less than $20,000 in income. So as a counselor or someone who, a student or a parent, you might look at this chart and help you kind of make a decision about your career path. At least looking at workforce outcomes allows you to understand how your interests maybe align with the workforce needs in the economy. So one recommendation that we take away from this chart at the Department of Labor is, as we see, maybe to guide students away from a more general degree into some more specific degrees, like even just picking a general business degree over just a general studies degree. You can see that although the business degree is still relatively general, it does have better workforce outcomes and doesn't appear to be a better signal to employers about what that degree is can be used for. It's a little bit more employable than just a general studies degree. These data are slightly dated. This report that I'm citing this from was from 2015, so this data is about 5 years old. If you're interested in looking at more recent information, I would strongly suggest looking at the workforce dashboard that the Montana University System displays. I've got the link there to the data tool, but you can also just Google it. I have just a screenshot of what that dashboard looks like, and you can see that this is data for the academic year that ends in 2017-18. And the university system keeps this very well updated. What you'll see is it's by discipline, which I have highlighted just the health disciplines here, and then by degree type, and then by program. So the ones that are, and then the workforce outcomes for each one. So if you were to hover over those blue bars there, a little box would display with more information on the percent of graduates who were working a year after graduation, and then their wages. And I've boxed some of the degrees that have wages over 40,000. That's what the green boxes represent. So for example, here, the dental hygiene program, the graduates from that program earned an average of $51,000 a year after graduation, and 100% of them were employed in the state. So that was a really strong program for associate's degree among associate's degree programs. Another strong program with good workforce outcomes was the nursing degree. About 91% of those who were graduated with that degree, so an ASN, RN, were employed in Montana, and they made about $54,000 in their first year after graduation. The largest health program is a bachelor's degree in nursing, and you'll see the workforce outcomes for those students were about $57,000, a little over a year after graduation, and 82% of them were employed in Montana. So this can be a really helpful tool for students or parents or counselors or really anyone who's trying to make a decision about what kind of career path they want to pursue. For example, one big thing that a lot of students are wondering is whether or not to pursue an associate's degree in nursing or a bachelor's degree, and this type of a dashboard can help students make those decisions. So you can see the wage differences and the differences in employment. Of course, some of these students may be continuing on to further education, in which case they may not be employed in Montana. So it's not necessarily that they were looking for a job and couldn't find one. It's just that the other 9% of ASN RNs and the other 18% of those BSN RNs, they may not have been looking for work, but this gives you an idea of how many were able to find a job in Montana. Another tool that's a really great thing to take a close look at is our employment projections that that the Department of Labor produces for the state, and we highlight not by college program, but we highlight it by job and project the number of job openings that there will be per year. So I just wanted to show you some highlights from our most recent publication, we produce a chart, like we would have a chart like this in the publication, or we do, that number of the top jobs requiring a bachelor's degree. So you can see registered nursing tops the list there with almost about 750 openings that we project per year. And then you can see the wage there, the average annual wage for each occupation. So there's a lot of health professions, as well as business professions and education professions, like general operations managers, some teaching positions, accountants, social work, HR specialists. You can see all require, or the typical education level is a bachelor's degree, and what the variation there is in the wages. And then we also have top jobs requiring at least some post-secondary education. So that's either a certificate or an associate's degree. And you can see the top jobs there. CNAs, the nursing assistants, are another nursing occupation that's tops the list. There's some other healthcare occupations like medical assistants, dental assistants, and then business occupations like bookkeepers. Oh, another health professions one would be the LPNs, and some teaching assistants, and things like that. So this is a great way to just kind of look to see what are some jobs that we project there to be a lot of openings in, and then you can compare the wages in those industries as well, and you can see the minimum or typical work requirement or education level and any work experience that's typically required for those degrees. So the higher education system is a pretty important workforce development tool in the state. The state graduates over 8,000 graduates per year over the last 3 years. And of those, across all programs and degree types, we see just under 70% of our students working in Montana after graduation. They work in every county of the state, so that just gives you an idea of kind of the breadth of impact that our university system has on the state. But we wanted to look, the Department of Labor and the university system partnered together to do a little bit more research into where the higher education system is really doing a great job of serving the needs of our state, and where maybe they're not, where there's some programs that are undersupplied for the needs that we see from employers. So we conducted a supply and demand analysis by occupation, by education level, and these are just sort of the high level results from there. So across all occupations, we projected that about 60%, a little bit more than 60% of the occupations in the state are at capacity, or they're meeting the needs for that much of the state. So about 40% are undersupplied, or there's no program there. So about 45% actually, that's what's in green. So you can see of all the occupations in the state, across all degree types, we see about 40% are oversupplied, of programs are oversupplied, or of occupations are oversupplied. About 18 or 17% meet demand, and then the remaining 40% are either undersupplied, or the colleges do not have a program that serves those occupations. And then you can see that the university system has a higher percentage, is able to meet the needs at a higher percentage for bachelor's degree and master's degree than they are able to for associates and post-secondary degrees, which is primarily certificates, 1 or 2 year certificates. So looking specifically at what those occupations are, the undersupplied occupations that require a post-secondary non-degree award or certificate are CNAs, automotive technicians, LPNs and licensed vocational nurses, medical assistants, dental assistants, medical records and health information technicians, and then heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration mechanics. And so if you are a student or a parent or counselor looking at where the need is, the difference between the supply and demand, you can take a look at this chart, and it will show you some potential areas to go into, and then the wages for those. So you'll see the supply is the average number of graduates from the university system. The demand is what we project at the Department of Labor using our employment projections to be the total openings per year, and then the median wage as well. So then that chart for the undersupplied for associate's degrees, a few healthcare occupations, dental hygienists and respiratory therapists, and then paralegals, and then some architectural degree drafters. So you can see those are pretty high wage occupations that businesses are having a hard time filling in their jobs for. So they probably would have a pretty good chance of finding a job in the state based on the data that we have. And those wages are fairly high. The dental hygienist is the highest with almost $75,000 per year. For bachelor's degree earners, the undersupplied programs, of course, registered nursing tops the list, accountants, HR specialists, graphic designers, training and development specialists, that's sort of in the HR capacity, and then community and social service specialists, which again is within the business degree. So you'll see some unmet need there. Again, the number of graduates and then our occupations, and most of those degrees are make at least $50,000 a year. And so those are what we would consider more high wage occupations as well. So that should give you an idea of sort of where the need is in the state in terms of undersupplied occupations. Of course, this varies by region a lot, with the more rural regions requiring or being more undersupplied. So this map shows what the different regions are that we define in the state. Of course, the Northwest region is where the University of Montana is. The Southwest region is Montana State. So those colleges, being the largest colleges in the state, supply a significant number of graduates to those regions. And so based on when you look at just the regional demand, they're meeting the regional demand for most of the occupations in the state. I think just about 50% of those occupations. And then you can see the North Central region has a number of colleges, and the South Central region has Billings. And so those occupations in those regions are fairly well supplied. But in the more eastern region, you see like 90% of those, really everything except for, about 90% of those occupations in those regions are undersupplied. So that's a significant shortage there that you see. And when we look at where graduates move after they graduate, a lot of them, especially from the Northwest and Southwest regions, migrate into our more rural regions in order to help meet that need. So that is happening. Those students are graduating and going into those more rural regions to help meet the need. Perhaps not at the rate that they necessarily need to be in order to meet that demand, but we are seeing the Northwest and Southwest regions, they are net exporters of graduates. So there's more graduates that leave those regions after graduation than there are that come into those regions, which is what we would want to see. We would expect to see from an economic development perspective that those students are responding to that unmet demand and moving into those regions to work. So then we kind of take a step back and look at okay, well, a lot of this analysis that I presented so far was done prior to 2020. And so now that we are in the sort of the year that is 2020, the global pandemic, what has happened to our labor market since then? And how do parents, counselors, students adjust their career path in order to account for some of these changes that have happened? So, so far, Montana has fared relatively well through the pandemic from an economic perspective. We rank 6th in the state for the best performance in terms of employment losses, and recovery during this period since March. So in April, the state lost about 60,000 jobs as a response to the pandemic. as some of the restrictions were put in place. And then by July, we had recovered about 42,000 of those jobs. But to date, as of September, we're still down about 13,000 jobs, about 2.5% employment drop. And when you look at payroll employment, it's still about 4.5% down from its peak in February. So employment growth was a big drop off initially, and then a good chunk recovery within a couple months by July. But then we've seen more slow employment growth since then, but we are growing, but it's been slow as the cases, as we've been managing sort of the rise in cases with reopening of the state. Particularly, so this shows what's happened since February in this year by industry in terms of employment. We saw the biggest drop off in the leisure and hospitality industry, and those businesses still are less than about 85% of their pre-pandemic employment levels. The other industries are looking more like 90 to 95% of the employment that they had in February. So they have been able to recover more quickly. Some of the other ones that have seen a more significant drop were, say, manufacturing, education and health services, and then also trade and transportation. Some of those industries suffered as well, but none really, as you can see here, the most sharp and most significant drop was in leisure and hospitality. So accommodation, food service, restaurant, retail, not necessarily occupations that have a high level of education required. They would be more individuals with a high school diploma, or maybe not even a high school diploma doesn't necessarily required for those occupations. So the COVID recession is kind of a unique scenario. It's not what we would normally see. With most recessions, we see like demand slow, jobs slowly disappear and then slowly return. And what we've seen with the COVID recession is that we had the same level of demand, we had the same level of supply, but the market closed. So those two pieces were unable to meet. And so it wasn't any underlying changes in supply and demand that caused this recession. And so conceivably, we would anticipate that as soon as those restrictions were lifted, the market was allowed to take place, that we would see the jobs return. But what we have seen is, since we're still managing the increase in COVID cases, the recovery has been a little slower. And of course, it's important to say that in order for us to have a healthy economy, we have to have a healthy workforce. And so when we look at long-term economic growth, it is incredibly important that we keep our workforce healthy. And so although we see some trade-offs between employment and the number of COVID cases we have, in the long run, those two things work together and they're not opposites. We want to see a healthy workforce in order for our economy to grow. We project right now that our economy will recover at some point to pre-pandemic employment levels in 2022. That's our projected time frame. So it's a relatively short recession that we're projecting right now, compared to, say, the Great Recession or previous downturns that we've had. And then I think from a perspective of students or counselors or our parents, the question becomes, well, is the labor market fundamentally going to be different when the job market recovers? And I think in the long term, when we're looking 5-10 years down the road, we don't really anticipate a significant change in the occupational mix of our economy. In the short term, we'll see tourism related jobs more slow to recover. Retail, trade, accommodation, food service certainly is going to take the longest to recover from the pandemic. But in the long run, especially when we look at occupations that require higher levels of education, we will still see those occupations being in demand in the state. I don't think that we will see a structural shift there. One thing that we will probably see is an increase, and we have seen, is an increase in remote work and work from home opportunities, which will probably change how the landscape, not only just within Montana, but we will probably see individuals move into Montana as they're able to work from home from their jobs in other states. Now, whether or not these individuals will stop working for other businesses in other states and come in and compete for jobs from Montana businesses has yet to be seen. But certainly, as students, you would anticipate that the labor market will be more agile that way and not as location based as it was before. So that hopefully will help some of our rural communities that have consistently struggled with recruitment and retention of a workforce, particularly a highly educated labor force. And so hopefully that will help alleviate some of those labor market constraints that we've historically seen for many years in the state. But in general, we don't anticipate there to be significant changes in the occupational mix. The last tool that I'll share with you all today before I wrap up is our jobs tracking dashboard that we put together at the Department of Labor. This is one page of that job tracking dashboard that talks about the types of occupations the types of job openings we have in the state. So this is a more real-time data that you can see the current number of job openings. There are about 9,000 openings that we have. And then you can look by types of job openings, by location, by pay, and by any particular type of occupation that you're interested in. So a lot of those, as you can see, the types of jobs we see the most on our jobs dashboard is retail, sales workers, housekeepers, cashiers, and then we also do see some truck drivers, which are higher paying occupations, LPNs, which are higher paying, and then medical health service managers is also a higher paying occupation as well. So this will kind of help give you a more updated information about our job needs that we have in the state. So with that, I will conclude, but I'm happy to take any questions, and this presentation will be available as well as all the links to the resources that I have covered here. So I'm happy to take any questions now. I know we're kind of towards the end of our time here, so I want to thank you again for having me here today. It was a pleasure to share this information with you. Feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is there as well. Thank you.